This is a chance to shift gears and to listen to our stalwart public servants, if you will, who have sat quite patiently listening to all of the challenges and the issues that we have. And then we look at them and say, okay, solve those problems. So I'd like to invite each of them to make statements, 10 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up. And thank you very much for joining us. You are in the, yes, sir, you are, since you're at home here.
Everybody awake? We're going to try. I'll start with a little story. I went home. I don't have children, but folks in this room who do probably appreciate this. It's about a week and a half ago. My nephew, who's in 6th grade, it was Sunday night, and that means you got to do your homework. And he thinks he had a book report due the next day, and he said it's almost all done because he had gotten all his materials and laid it all out. But I had to tell him that the hard part is actually putting it together and writing the report. So he thinks he had it done. The good news is, for the most part, everybody you've heard have told you the materials you need to do tomorrow when you're going to put them to work, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm going to go into a little of the work I did in Georgia. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of it because you pretty much heard from every modal interest in this state. I'm kind of going to snip it to how I had to, my biggest story was putting my book report together, and then also some materials that are available, not just in Georgia, but for other members of, not just this mega region, but the Southeast in general. Again, I finished my Georgia statewide freight plan. The board adopted it in February 2012. So luckily, my homework is done and got turned in and got accepted. Who doesn't like good data? Planners love this kind of stuff. We started with basically a snapshot in the picture of where's the freight concentrations. And if you know the southeastern Georgia, the two dark brown areas, the one at the top is Metro Atlanta, the one down to the right is the Port of Savannah. That's great, data's good, but again, making the connection and writing your book report. One of the biggest, again, questions we had to do is how is everything connected? So we also had to frame this in a business language. Usually DOTs are used to talking about infrastructure and rights of ways, and number of lanes and levels of service and all that good stuff. But actually, we actually had to make sure that this is really about economic development. That's what freight is. So we had to use that language, and these are our assets. I won't go into the details. The map looks kind of busy, and it would have been busier if I'd put more on there. But you've heard about the Port of Savannah. The Port of Brunswick, the last week, has moved from number 3 to number 1 for auto imports. I drive a Volkswagen. Mine came in through that port. Again, you guys have heard about Atlanta. I'm not going to talk about a lot of it there. From a railroad perspective, it's a major hub for the 2 Class 1 railroads. The airport we just heard about. Intermodal yards, and if anybody does not know what intermodal means, it's the whole truck, where truck and rail meet. So if you're driving along and you see a truck with this, looks like a metal box on it, or a train with the metal box on it, the box goes from truck to rail, rail to truck. That's what intermodal looks like. There are several locations around the state where these yards where the truck and the rail meet. Luckily, we've just got the latest one, and this doesn't have a little pointer on it, but there's one about almost exactly 2 hours south of here on I-75. I'm in Cordele. It looks like if you know what that is, it looks like a little bit out of the way. It is connected to the Port of Savannah via Shortline Railroad. I didn't put the Shortline Railroads on here because it would even look more like a spider's nest. So, again, I've got my infrastructure or my assets. The 3 key themes that we talked about were the 3 C's that drove what we need to do into the future to make ourselves successful. Capability, capacity, and connectivity. I gave you some examples of what we were talking about with those 3 C's. Again, I'll cut to the chase. This is the recommendations of the plan. I won't go into details of how we got there. If you want to read it, I've got it online. The port we just heard about is the #1 freight priority in the state. The Port of Jasper, which was mentioned as a longer term, once the Port of Savannah is built out and at capacity in terms of operations, the South Carolina Georgia joint project would be that Port of Savannah. It's actually downstream from that ship, which is actually heading upstream to the port. That was the marine recommendations. Highway is important. The map, again, a combination of several ingredients. In purple lines, those are capacity projects where you're just, in the future, there's going to have to need more laneage. That was talked about a little bit earlier on I-85. I'll stop just a moment to say Doug Frate, who's from the South Carolina DOT, is my counterpart. He didn't make it. If he was here, I probably would have pointed to him to show the I-85 connection, the I-20 connection. Those were coordinating with the state of South Carolina, where it crosses into the river. Whether they have the money to complete it on their side, that's another state-level issue. But an example, again, we know what our neighbors are doing, and it's important for everybody to know what their immediate neighbor is doing, and then in the mega region also. Key interchanges are also on there. As the little yellow dots, there's several in Atlanta, one in Macon, and several in Savannah. At this point, I'll go back to my analogy of writing the book report. I don't have to write a lot of it, but I have to maybe read some other sources that have been done. Those dots were recommendations that were through the MPO planning process. Our lunch speaker said that Georgia hadn't done a business-based freight plan. It wasn't really business in that language, but we have been doing freight plan apparently. I just didn't realize it. So I didn't have to go out and invent a lot of projects or look for freight projects. They were out there in key MPO areas and key connections. This is some kind of non-interstate projects that we talked about needing off the interstate. I won't go into them because you can read them, but one that's at the top of the map, which is called the Chattanooga Bypass. Again, I do have one of my Tennessee counterparts here. That was in a Tennessee DOT I-75 corridor study, and I believe the Cleveland, Tennessee MPO had it in their long-range plan too. So knowing what your neighbors is doing, it definitely pays off. Rail. I'm proud of the map on the right because, do you still have any Norfolk-Southern guy here? Yeah. It's not publicly held infrastructure. And I don't blame, we don't have the data sets for it. So I profusely thank CSX Norfolk-Southern's cooperation on this whole study. That map basically showed where in the future they were thinking there's going to be like some capacity pressures on those rail lines. Again, that's what we were told, and we were glad to know how that again fits in with the connection of all the modes. Again, I talked about what intermodal looks like. There's a picture at the bottom. In a nutshell, those are on the screen are the rail needs that we were going to need going forward. Rail terminals, again, where the trucks and the rail meet, or the basically mode shift from rail onto or off of. There's dots around the state that represent those. As most folks know, in most urban areas, a lot of existing these terminals are a lot of times have development around them, and they have neighbors, people that live in the neighborhoods and don't necessarily like the noise or the traffic from that. So those are still important terminals no matter where you're at, and we found some need to go ahead and expand if available, or build new ones. I'll spend 2 seconds on the rail, on the airport mode. You heard about that just now. Little known fact is the UPS has a package sorting facility in Southwest Georgia at the Albany Airport, and that's the reason why, from a state perspective, an extended runway would be a good idea. I will now transition to stuff that might hopefully be of interest to everybody in the room. Hopefully you'll see something in here that just kind of makes you think. This is all data from that freight plan. We benchmarked ourselves versus the region and the country. So again, if you're in the Southeast, you kind of get a flavor of this should ring true to you. A lot of our freight moves still by truck. If you go to the Northeast, it's a little different. There's a little more rail. It's, again, economics make it happen, but that's where we're at. I'll zip a little forward to August 2013. Toby Carr did a kickoff this morning and talked about one of our kind of secondary successes from this freight plan. Besides getting it out there and getting projects identified in a coherent way of how they all connect, a state transportation board identified a state freight corridor. For folks that are with FHWA that knows that there's a national freight corridor coming out, this is not that. This is our freight corridor that basically alters a state law that was mentioned that requires us to balance our funds by congressional district. Projects on these red lines are now not subject to that congressional balancing. Again, that's state law. You'll see primarily interstates, a lot of what look like, rural roads that don't mean anything, although if I had a pointer, I could show you where 2.5 hours southeast of here, it got mentioned, I think the Jacksonville, Florida paper picked it up first. There's a shoe factory going to be built in 2014, $10 million. They claim they're going to make 4 million pairs of shoes a year. Who are they going to make them for? But primarily Walmart and other U.S. vendors. So these are shoes that are not being made overseas and being brought in, but being made here in America for American stores. You guys just saw a little bit of this and the ranking. I'm not so much going to talk about where Atlanta is. I basically thought, wow, there's 3 of them in the Southeast. So again, and since we're all connected, I'm here in Atlanta, I see Atlanta, but New Orleans and Miami probably means something to me as a state of Georgia. Here's a little fun snapshot, again, from the freight plan. If we looked about who our kind of trading partners are from truck and rail, you can read this, but my fun little story when I was at a conference in Louisville, Kentucky, kind of connecting the dots in my head, I knew from the freight plan that a lot of peanuts are produced in Georgia. A lot of them are shipped out by rail. Well, as it turns out, talking to folks at Kentucky DOT, the largest peanut butter plant in the country is outside Lexington, Kentucky. So if you eat Jif, it probably came from there. Probably was Georgia peanuts that were railed out of the state to them. So that was kind of neat, that connection. And just for fun, and I'm not kidding, across the street from the Jif plant is a Smucker's jelly plant. No lie. Again, you've heard about Atlanta and where it is in terms of the airport. I just said, let's just color code the ones in the Southeast. Again, Atlanta is on its way up. Southwest, it was mentioned that Southwest Airlines is building its presence over AirTran. That's pretty significant because AirTran did not carry cargo. Southwest does, and as it takes over AirTran, you'll expecting more Southwest-focused air cargo. So again, 4 of those airports are in the Southeast. Probably affects pretty much all of us in this room. This is my little fun picture that I did as part of this freight plan, just to do some case studies of 3 of my favorite economic opportunities in the state. Because again, this is a freight plan not just on logistics, but it's truly economic development. So we look forward and saying, what do we think our growth sectors will be in the state? Scratch your head. Those 3, those are interesting. They might be growth freight intensive. Let's dig down into that. So I did some case studies. The first one, broiler productions. What's a broiler? Not intuitive, but it's actually a frozen chicken. I put at the bottom, again, it's a little bit of Georgia showing off. We're the top state producer, but look in the Southeast. Probably your state is red on there. So that's a lot of business. So we talked to one location, one company. In Perry, Georgia, in the star kind of in the middle. Purdue Chicken has a distribution center there. Overall, that industry is a $4.4 billion industry for the state. That one location supplies most of the Chick-fil-A's and Walmarts in the Southeast, so anybody eat Chick-fil-A too, it probably came from there. Now let's do a little quiz, just kind of wake you up. Where do you guys think are top U.S. exports? Not just Georgia, but the folks that were red on that map, where do we export our chickens to in this country? What country? What? Oh, see, he cheats because he's a professor. You ever heard of NAFTA? Remember that? It surprises me too. Also, the fun thing on this map, and there's a lot going on, is since we're getting all connected, from this one location in Perry, Georgia, bottom right-hand side of the screen, that's the port of Jacksonville, Florida. The exports of their chicken going overseas to Russia go through the port of Jacksonville. So again, we have boundaries and we all have state lines, and I know that I work for the state of Georgia, but we're all somehow connected. Second case study, again, pretty predominant for everybody in this room. In Georgia, forestry, lumber products, forest products, $25 million business. It's 24% of our state manufacturing output. We talked to Weyerhaeuser, got information of, again, there's some of their supply chains of what they have going on. You see little trucks and trains, there's stuff moving around. Most importantly, on the last one and this one, you see, again, dotted lines going out of the state of Georgia or into the state of Georgia. So I did a little research just for fun, and this wasn't part of the study. I just Googled and I said, I wonder where they're going to pick up their stuff. Well, Weyerhaeuser, there's their timberlands. So if you're in eastern North Carolina, most of Alabama, Mississippi, and you can see them, that's Weyerhaeuser's timberlands coming in on our roads, our rail ports. Again, we're all connected. Almost done, folks. Third fun-filled case study, retail. And we had Michelle Livingston from Home Depot spoke to us, which was awesome to have her speak to us at lunch. They were great giving us some of their information. She talked about the Four Corners import strategy. Savannah is one of them. 15 to 20% of their imports come through there. And again, what does this mean for anybody in this room besides the map showing that they've got trucks going in and out of Georgia and to your state or city or MPO? There's a list of the stores that what she called the rapid deployment centers, those RDCs, the number of stores that they supply in the Southeast. So, gosh, no wonder there's a lot of stuff coming in and out. This was the last slide I talked about in my freight and logistics plan. We didn't, we had those traditional metrics in FHWA. We've got them, benefit, cost, bottleneck, time savings, all those good things, levels of service, safety improvements. But the ultimate one that really need to be talked about, because this is going to be truly economic based, is return on investment. And we were able to show our recommended projects in the packages had a return on investment. That being said, if you're curious for the whole thing, it's on the web. I'm going to take a minute again. Hopefully, again, everybody should really see something interesting on here. That was the Georgia story. Most of us know, it was mentioned on a couple slides I saw, the MPO Birmingham. Norfolk-Southern's Railroad's Crescent Corridor Initiative. I won't speak much time to it, but it's one of those things, regardless of the mode, regardless of what state or MPO what you're in, there's stuff that affects us all that we all need to know about. That's one of them. Most of you guys probably already know about it, have heard about it. I believe Birmingham got not just a rail improvement, but got an intermodal yard. Yeah, I think it's open. Atlanta, the existing one we got is going to be expansion in phase 2. Did you got 2? I'm just all over this. Could you back up? I'm sorry, there we go. Not to be forlorn, CSX also has the National Gateway Project. I won't go into stuff in the slide, but it's an example of things that are out there, regardless of the mode, regardless of geography, that affect our region and movement of goods. I, as a Georgia DOT representative, am a member of ITTS, Institute for Trade and Transportation Studies. There's the membership, there's their website. I get kind of all kinds of good stuff from them. It's a coalition, basically. Everybody remembers LAT's study? That was its predecessor. That was the daddy that gave birth to it. That study focused on those states as a regional block trade with Latin America. These are a couple slides from that LAT study, just to get a flavor for what it looked at. If we're talking regionalism, that there's stuff out there. It's highway network, the rail network, the airports, the ports, how everything kind of related, more than just this state or this MPO. I get all kinds of helpful slides and materials as being an ITTS member. This is the one, again, depending on who you talk to, the impact from the deepening of the Panama Canal. That blue line, again, at the time, the person who did this was predicting that blue line is kind of like the continental divide. The right one is kind of like anything to the west of that. It's cheaper and faster to bring your goods in from Asia into West Coast ports. And the predictions were, with the deepening of the port, shipping through the East Coast, that line, that kind of magic economic line moves somewhat west. So look, all of a sudden Chicago, what big areas? Memphis, Dallas, is now on the side where it might be economically more as feasible to come into the East Coast, an East Coast port. But again, depends who you talk to. Some folks, Curtis correctly said, some people say it's going to be the end of the world. Some think it's not going to be much change. For fun, go to the website. beatthecanal.com. The West Coast ports are kind of nervous. That was theirs. Again, some more good trends that I get from them, regional trends from ITTS. I'm also a member of the I-95 Corridor Coalition. They do more, this is not literally, if anybody doesn't know, it's just not about I-95, the road. I-95 Corridor Coalition are the states that I-95 go through. I gave some samples of multimodal projects they go through, shipping, rail, anyway. Thank you.
Right. Hi, I'm Liza Joffrion. I'm Director of the Multimodal Division at Tennessee Department of Transportation, TDOT. And just want to kind of give you an overview of transportation in Tennessee and some of our current freight planning efforts. Okay. This is our state seal. And the reason I put that up there first is because over the summer, I got an email from our commissioner, and he was invited to speak at a meeting in Toronto between Southeastern states and Canadian provinces. I don't know if some of you in the room might have been at that meeting, but he was invited to attend that meeting, and his assigned topic. Let's see if I can pull it up here. His assigned topic was, how has Tennessee turned its position as a landlocked state within the southeastern United States into a major benefit for international trade? And this was sent to me that, can you send some bullet points on this? And he immediately got back a flurry of emails saying, we're not a landlocked state. So we've got a boat on our state seal. Tennessee, we are most definitely a 4R state, railroad, river, runway. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm supposed to be. We have over 1,000 miles of inland waterway, navigable waterway in Tennessee. We're connected to the Gulf of Mexico by the Mississippi River, as well as by way of the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway, the TEN-TOM. We have the three major rivers. Go back one. I don't know if I can make it go back. Yeah, there we go. Three rivers, the Mississippi River, Tennessee River, and the Cumberland River. They're near Chattanooga. We have something called the Chickamauga Lock, which is in kind of dangerous shape right now, and we're hoping that there's a solution to the funding situation for our waterways infrastructure, because we have about 400 miles of navigable waterway east of Chattanooga that's at risk if the Chickamauga Lock can't be. Oh, sorry, I thought you were motioning to me. If the Chickamauga Lock fails, we would lose about 400 miles of waterway. There we go. We actually have to have a new port development. There was a Tiger grant for the Port of Kate's Landing, Northwest Tennessee Regional Port. That is being built, and currently it's been designated as one of the select Tennessee industrial sites. There are 10 of these select sites that are certified to have certain characteristics, and that's one of them. Right now it does not have rail connectivity. There's a Shortline railroad that provides a connection about, within a couple of miles, but we need a spur between there to get it connected. We also have several other small small communities around the state that are looking into public port investments. Gainesboro, Clarksville, and Hartsville, Tennessee. Runways. Memphis is the second busiest freight airport in the world. There's a strong interest in Memphis in developing an Aerotropolis. This is kind of the main theme of their planning efforts there. They envision a very air freight-centric cluster of businesses and have a lot of support from their chamber and their MPO as far as working toward that vision. FedEx averages 1.5 million packages a day. It's quite the thing to see if you ever get the opportunity to watch the midnight sort at FedEx. It's pretty cool. Tennessee also has 70 general aviation airports, and we have a tax on fuel that provides funding for the Transportation Equity Fund. The aviation component of that provides $48 million in grants to airports across the state each year. Railroads, and I love this graphic. It may be kind of hard to see the specifics, but basically this shows the four largest Class 1 railroads in the U.S. BNSF, CSX, UP, and Norfolk-Southern. And you can see Memphis has connectivity to all four of those, plus CN, which is more vertical right there along the Mississippi River. Tennessee, there we go. Tennessee has 6 out of the 7 Class 1 railroads enter Tennessee in one way or another. CSX and Norfolk-Southern have the vast majority of the track, but there are little snippets of several others as well. I think, let's see, Memphis is one of only 5 U.S. cities with service from 5 Class 1 railroads. A lot has been spent on rail infrastructure in recent years, and intermodal traffic. There's a lot of intermodal traffic coming from the West Coast across the land bridge to Memphis. It's really, we're always being asked the question about how the Panama Canal is going to impact freight, and particularly freight in Memphis, and it's right there on the dividing line. It's unclear, but we do figure that anything that makes freight transportation more efficient in general, whichever way it comes from, will benefit Memphis. So, I'm sorry, could you take me back again? Wanted to mention, we have extensive shortline railroads in Tennessee, and right now there are about 22 shortline railroads. These are supported by their 18 railroad authorities that are public entities, usually composed of 1 or more counties. And this is kind of in a transition right now. The Transportation Equity Fund that I mentioned earlier for aviation, there has also been a tax on diesel fuel that has supported investments in the shortline railroads. At the end of August, a court decision came down that ruled that our 7% tax on diesel fuel, that was discriminatory under the federal 4R Act, that it was discriminatory against the railroads, and that tax is definitely at risk going forward and could possibly also involve a payback of past collected taxes going back several years. This has been a pretty big upheaval in my division because we've had to essentially freeze contracts, and if you had a bridge half built, your contract could continue funding to finish the other half of that bridge, but beyond that, we needed to pretty much shut things down because of the risk of having to pay back. So this kind of escalates, and then it is going to drop to nothing. The shortline railroads are very interested in securing a different funding source. We'll see where that goes. Okay, I have 3 minutes, I think. Roadways, Tennessee has great roads, rated second in America for top state for transportation infrastructure. Currently, our freight planning process, we have in response to MAP 21, gotten a freight planning effort underway. There's going to be a statewide freight advisory committee, and then there'll be 3 regional committees. We're very fortunate to be able to work with our universities to facilitate this. University of Memphis, Vanderbilt, and University of Tennessee are hosting and facilitating these meetings that have a wide range of stakeholders, academics, government, and private sector representation, both from transportation providers, the modal providers, as well as the shippers who actually have the stuff that needs to be moved. And there's a strong commitment there to make it worth their time as far as to be able to receive meaningful input and have their suggestions really drive where the freight planning direction goes. Let's see here. We should have a draft freight plan together by summer 2014. Once that's done, they're going to put together a video and brochures, something that can be widely distributed to kind of tell the story of freight in Tennessee. I know we had been asked to mention something about freight data. Tennessee uses TranSearch data, as well as we're going to be using some ATRI. And somebody from ATRI was here earlier, I think. And then also FAF data. Modeling. The model is currently being updated. There's a statewide model, and freight is a component of that, and then rail a smaller component of that. Megaregions. We recognize that freight has no boundaries, and we really can't plan for it in isolation, so meetings like this are great opportunities. As our freight advisory committee goes forward, we are planning to have an event probably in February or so that'll be led by our Division of Long Range Planning and my colleague Tanisha Hall. And I know she is going to be contacting other state DOTs to see if they can join us to address those mega region kind of issues. So, but MAP 21's recognition of regionally and nationally significant projects is definitely a step in the right direction. So, I think that wraps us up. I'll wrap it up. You just need this.
There's a laser on there. I'm dangerous. You want your facts? I could use them as mine. Good afternoon. I will warn you at the beginning, I have spent several years talking to our legislature, so I've learned the one fact that's not a gift to be offered an opportunity to go present in front of them. And I've learned how to talk very quickly and not say anything that's worth a darn. So if you don't understand anything I say, I have been successful, but that's why. I would be remiss if I didn't start with the end in mind and talk about real quickly the new 25-year infrastructure plan that my boss and partner today, Nick Tennyson has been assigned by the governor to prepare and develop. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because he's still in the thralls of developing that, and I'm sure it will be a great read when we get a chance to read it. What I will spend time on, though, is what I hope, envision, Kaler, hit that slide, please, is the use of information that has already been collected over the last several years through a large group of people and a large number of studies and efforts within our state. Now, the guiding principle that says that I think Nick and the governor is looking for is something that takes the infrastructure we have and uses it to grow the economy. Now, unfortunately, to help North Carolina, right? Bless you. I kind of feel like the guy that needs an American Express card, because all day today I've heard people talk about airports and ports and railroads, and North Carolina never comes up. So I guess we're not doing anything worth a darn. But the things we have to look at, and it's interesting from a megaregion perspective, because North Carolina is really, from what I've learned over the last several years, separated into three regions. Those things that are east of 95, which is where the red dot is going. Those things that are west of 77, I-77, and then everything in between, which we call the Piedmont Crescent, which, is kind of interesting because it's a part of the Piedmont Megaregion, but that's where most of the development today happens in our state. And I guess anecdotally, when you look at it from a demographics perspective, that's where most of the millennials, the younger, all the folks like me that are the seniors that are looking to go sit on a porch somewhere, we're on the west of 77 or the east of 95, which creates problems in itself as you start thinking about economic development. So let's see if this works. One of the things, and this is not any different, one of the things I want to talk about I forgot, and I'll go into is describe North Carolina. We've got 67 general aviation airports run by public airports. We've got 100 counties, 100 economic developers, 7 economic regions, the new 8 prosperity zones, 14 transportation divisions, the municipalities, the list goes on and on. We have, is anyone here from Texas? Unless Texas has added a driveway in the last couple of days, we've got the largest highway network, state-maintained network in the country. We've got the second largest state-maintained ferry system in the country. A lot of infrastructure that has a direct impact on what I'll show you here down the road that are our main drivers from an economic perspective: agriculture, tourism, and the military, which doesn't sound much different than what everyone else has been talking about today, too. So, common problem. North Carolina is not any different than the South. I mean, essentially, we see over the next 10 years growth in the population, and because of efficiencies in fuel in the cars, and because of extensions in the numbers of between the time you have to get registration or get licenses on cars, our budget, our money that normally we would be getting is going to be diving. So we know we've got going in over the next 10 years an infrastructure gap. We project, and we did a 2040 plan, we project over that 30-year period that gap of wants versus actual resources is going to be closer to $30 billion or more than $30 billion. And the actual growth in population will be 42%. So somewhere from around 9 million to 13.5, 14 million people. So, going in, and this is one of the things that I think the governor and our secretary decided we needed to try to figure out is we already know we don't have the money. Pretty simple thing to identify. So how can we take what we have and do a better job of using that resource? And essentially what they came up with, and I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts because the law, House Bill 817, is fairly long, lengthy, and it's got a lot of interesting political stuff in it. But essentially what it tried to do, or what it's doing, is it's taking multiple pots of money and taking us out of this equity formula concept that we had that paired our 14 divisions up and counted population and unpaved roads and all these other, there's 3 or 4 criteria, and tried to spread the money equally across the state. Technically what they've done is done away with that concept and created really, for me in my simplistic mind, 2 pots of money. That money that is used for essentially preservation or infrastructure maintenance, and then that money that is going to be used for for growth, for new infrastructure, for expansion. And essentially what they've done is they've broken it into these three categories: projects of statewide significance, projects of regional significance, and then projects that are local significance. And in our definition, whether it's accepted or not across our state, local means within our 14 divisions, each of the 14 divisions. Let's talk about the things that we've done in the past and the information. I'm a little biased. No, I'm a lot biased in this. The information that we've collected over the last several years, mainly because the studies I'm going to talk about, I was the staff lead in helping get accomplished, with the exception of the very first one. The General Assembly directed our Office of State Budget to actually do a logistics study. The reason I've listed all these studies in the Logistics Task Force, the Maritime Study Report, on and on and on, is because each of these groups of studies pulled in stakeholders from across the state, ranging from hundreds to, for example, with the Maritime Study, we had a private-public advisory council of 4 dozen. Let's talk about the first study, the logistics study itself, that was completed in 2008, was actually led by a group of universities in North Carolina, the State University of North Carolina, if I should add. We're not too good at football, but we do pretty good in studies, I guess. The bottom line with that study was we needed to look at, and North Carolina needed to be more globally oriented. And it's interesting because someone said earlier today they didn't know a lot about megaregions until they were asked to come here. I didn't know a lot about megaregions until this study, because that was the first time I saw NCDOT directed to look at global and regional issues outside of North Carolina. And it was the first study that identified for us, North Carolina engineers and DOT, we think safety and capacity and congestion and those types of things. It identified for us the importance we have as it relates to economic benefit and the welfare of the state of North Carolina and also the region. And we've seen this map 90 times, I think, today. Next study. The previous study recommended that the state actually put together a task force of interagency folks to guide the state into the next steps of looking at transportation and economic growth in a logistics manner. And the then governor, Perdue, put together a group of folks that included the Secretary of Environment, the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary DOT was the chair, Commissioner of Agriculture, a bunch of legislators, about 15 people. And essentially what they went through was a process of traveling across the state, and they went to a dozen locations and had another half dozen meetings in Raleigh. But they went across the state, reaching out to the local government entities and asked, okay, from your perspective, how can we be helpful? What should we do to make you more competitive? And you see, it's nothing new here. I mean, it's the same stuff everybody comes up with. It's rather interesting. For us, though, in the industries, for example, agriculture, the way the Commissioner of Agriculture puts that together is worth $75 billion a year to the state of North Carolina. We are first in things like sweet potato and chickens and pigs and turkeys and you name it, Christmas trees. I mean, it's interesting. We ship a lot of Christmas trees out to the South America, a lot of the Hispanic countries. Hit it, Kaler. It's not working. One of the outshoots of the previous group, the Logistics Task Force, was guidance from, at that time, the Lieutenant Governor was actually I said secretary, but the Lieutenant Governor was actually the chair of that task force, I'm sorry. He had this vision in his mind that if North Carolina was going to become more effective globally, you had to look at how we would reach outside of North Carolina. If 90% of the people in the world don't live in the United States, that means most of the products that we are strong in have to go out there, correct? So his vision was, okay, how do we create these portals? And there's no magic to this. We had 7 economic regions at the time, so he said, okay, let's just talk about 7 portals. We'll pull the regions in and we'll talk to them about how we might focus on what industries are important to them and how we might help them connect to the globe. Hit it again, please. And theoretically, what it was an attempt on our part to put DOT, the MPOs, and the RPOs together with the economic developers and identify where their important sites were, to identify where the industrial parks were that the locals were focusing on, and to try to see if there was some commonality in where we were putting the roads, the airport runways, the rail connections. Because one of the things that you learn very quickly if you ever do any site work for recruiting or economic development is the first thing they want is they want everything faster than you normally do it. They want a road, they want a rail, and they want a runway, in like a third the time you normally can deliver. So part of this was looking at these sites, and these here real quickly, you see 36 sites that were identified for us by the economic developers that we kind of worked with the MPOs and RPOs about, and we've got 20 RPOs and 17 MPOs. Is that a pizza? How ready are you? That was really the question. You've got all these 36 sites. You as an economic developer want DOT to expend funds to build you a road or a driveway there. Are you ready? If someone comes in here, barring the opportunities like Continental Tire that we lost to South Carolina because we knew how to shoot ourselves in the head and whatnot, barring those things, if we have someone come in that's very interested in doing business in the state of North Carolina, are you at a high level of readiness? Do you have dual power? Do you have the environmental permitting to allow you to do the work? Do you have the property? I mean, can you donate the right-of-way to DOT? Can you provide funding? How ready are you? And we did actually a readiness assessment of those three dozen sites. But I think the important part of this was, from my perspective, as someone who deals a lot with the Department of Commerce and all these economic developers, it was the first time we started talking about where the transportation was going as it relates to where they were recruiting industry. The maritime study, this was one that came over and over again. Everywhere we went across the state as we were talking logistics, we need to use our ports better. Obviously, we need to use our ports better because I don't remember anyone talking about North Carolina ports today. We got 2 of them, one in Wilmington and one in Morehead City that is actually the closest port on the East Coast to deep water. Is naturally deep. Just happens to be in downtown Morehead City and they hate the port, but that's another issue. We also own a railroad that goes at 700 miles from that port to Charlotte, which is kind of interesting. So we have the infrastructure, right? But the question was, and can you say Panama? Because everyone's talked about that. Panama. I think it was supposed to be done in 2014, right? Now it's 2015. The question was, do we want to spend $5 billion building a new container port in Southport that theoretically was going to get 4 million TEUs a year and compete against Charleston and Savannah and Norfolk and New York and whoever else, when today all we do is about 200,000 TEUs. And today we've got the capacity at both our ports to probably do about 2.5 million. We don't have the business, so do we want to get into that business? And it was interesting to me what Curtis said earlier about there not being a flood. I was one of the few people when we were doing this study that said, I'm not sure I really want to commit the state to $5 billion for something I don't know that's ever going to happen. And oh, by the way, even if we build it, can we compete? Both our ports, and no insult to Norfolk-Southern or CSX, who's not here, both our ports are only served by one railroad, so we're really not competitive in a rail perspective. They are 85% served by trucks. The cool thing about this study, hit again, Kaylor, for me, was I asked a simple question when I pulled the consultants in and said, give us a hand doing this. 3 simple questions. Where's the maritime industry going? I mean, really, what's Panama going to do? What are the markets and industries that are important to North Carolina? And then how will we leverage that to make North Carolina more successful? Hit it again. And you can get that study on the web. You just saw that. I'm sure they'll share the webpage. The consultants put together a number of opportunities. I'm just showing you one that range from soybeans to containers to refrigerated cargo, you name it. This is one that they underestimated significantly, and a lot of us are getting involved in it. What it turns out for North Carolina, probably our best bet is to get into niche markets and look at bulk and break bulk and try not to compete. That makes sense. By not competing, you know, there are a lot of guys and gals, well, I say there are a lot of guys that have made it through their careers by hitting singles. You don't always hit home runs, right? So what they did for us is identified the cost, they identified the products, the business, and then, you know, you see their benefit cost ratio. They gave us a breakdown on every one of those opportunities, and they broke it down for each of the ports as well. They also started the thought process for us of, and this is kind of interesting, you know, North Carolina saying, well, you know what, maybe we're better off partnering with someone else. What this picture depicts is what they believe over time is the market that we could serve through our own ports, and that's the green colors. Meaning in the dark green today, as I recall, we could probably do 2 truck turns. Light green, questionable, maybe 1 truck turn. But essentially the browns, what they said were that the Northeast, probably you're looking at Norfolk as being your best partner, and then the far west, Charleston and Savannah. And because they're closer, I mean, they're closer than our own port. So part of this is being realistic. If you're going to generate jobs, you got to be competitive, and part of transportation is cost, right? I throw this one in there because we have been studying I-95 for 20 years. We now currently have a conditional, well, what was it? Provisional conditional reservation for the use of interstate rehabilitation and reconstruction tolling on I-95. There are feds in here, they can explain it to you. I got a letter that says that. Essentially, what it means is maybe, which would have been a hell of a lot easier for me to read if they just said maybe. But anyway, the reason I put this in here is we're the in-between state. You know, we're the guys you guys drive down through to go to Florida, and then you bounce halfway back when you don't want to be that far down south. We started this study on I-95. The task I was assigned was tell me how you can take a project that'll take you 70 years to reconstruct and hit it. How can you reconstruct it in 20 to 25 years? Well, the thing that bounced to the top was actually tolling, and that's why I mentioned the conditional provisional reservation of that ISRRP program. We started addressing that. We started looking at that as a way to reconstruct 182 miles of interstate. And then when we got through the public comment period in our EA, part of the process was, or part of the comment was, well, you're going to hurt us economically. If you toll I-95, you're going to kill our economy. Now, let's forget for 20 years we're investing $4.5 billion in those 8 counties, but you're going to kill our economy. So we had to do another study. We finished that study. We're doing another piece of that study. We've been studying since 2000, so they'll be studying after my career, I think. The interesting part of this, what they found is we measured against 2 things. Business as usual, which is we had about $45 million a year we knew we could invest in keeping the road open. And then if money fell out of the sky from somewhere. And that was the jobs we were arguing for the locals and for the states that we said, it's like 16,000, I think. Hit it, please. Sorry. Apparently I am, yeah, that's good because it goes through all, that was animated and it goes through everything. So what we did is we looked at not just business as usual, but if that build, no funding, economic impact, if everything just, the money just fell out of the sky. And then we looked at, okay, if we toll, what are the impacts? And basically what we found, the final outcome, final findings was that, number one, the road needs improvement. It was built in the 50s through the 80s. And basically it didn't matter how we funded it, it was still going to grow jobs. And I'm being told to stop. We got a 2040 plan. That's it. We got a large group of people. We have actually 4 boards that we deal with, members that are involved in all this collaboration. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, and we have a few moments for questions for this panel, and then we're going to retreat upstairs for our reception. Questions? Michael?
The feasibility of the states in the Megaregion working together to have one set of regulations for the trucking industry, like weight restrictions and things like that. And if it's feasible, would that benefit, the business climate of the Piedmont Atlantic Megaregion?
I'd probably jump into the advantage, what used to call the Advantage 75 program. That's people already know it's out there. Kind of the way station. I forget the term we use. You see those little kind of the radar antenna, microwave antenna radar above the through lines, and some trucks don't go through them because they've already pre-registered. So that's an example of what's already out there.
Are you alluding to, though, the feasibility of all of us states using the same weights? Certainly that's feasible. Will it happen? I think that's a political question because, for example, I know South Carolina allows, 100,000, 110,000 on I-26 going to Charleston. Is it 26? We allow 136,000 pounds from an inland port that we define as an inland port to our ports. And the whole purpose is to give us an advantage. So it's feasible.
Roberto, don't answer that because you're on tape. You're being recorded. No, seriously, the terms like harmonization, truck size harmonization. My friends at the Federal High Administration know that USDOT is doing a study right now. So nationally, it's a big question. Our board in the last year had presentations done to them pro and con. The legislature hasn't touched it, so use the word political, it is. And so the good thing I know to say is, even at the federal level, it's being looked at actively right now.
Derek. Microphone here.
You can probably hear me.
Yeah.
Just talk louder. When you did the toll study, what would... When you did the toll study.
Oh, that was good.
I like the term user fee.
The user fee. When you did the user fee, you didn't show the dollar amount up there. How were you setting that up, and what was the dollar amount you were supposing in the study that you did?
What do you mean by dollar amount? The cost?
Yeah, was it 50 cents? Did you have 10 gates or just have one that everyone paid a
Well,
buck
we looked at a number of alternatives with open systems and closed systems and partially closed systems and essentially phased out sections. It was essentially $20 to go one way for a truck, as I recall, and like $15 or $17 for a car, something of that nature. And it's interesting because depending on who you talk to and the data we collected, even though the locals are the ones that are fighting it so much, a preponderance of the traffic is actually through traffic. And it's traffic that doesn't buy fuel in North Carolina. Now, that doesn't really ring well for the feds, I understand, but I'm not a Fed. I'm a North Carolinian, so.
Haley?
Fact that you know what your neighboring states are doing, but they may not have the same ability to pay that you do. So this may be a bigger question than for the state DOTs, but what are the opportunities for cross-state infrastructure financing?
That is like, I guess I used to say the $64,000 question, but that's with inflation these days, it's, 1 point. You want to tackle that one? I mean,
I think it's an opportunity. I mentioned the northeast of our state, for example, in Norfolk, and I don't remember who it was talking about the route from the port or Hampton Roads to Raleigh. That is actually not to Raleigh all the way, but essentially from 95 to Hampton Roads is a priority corridor that was identified. So the question you're asking is is there a way for the two states or the regions to partner to deliver that? And if it's a private-public venture, I mean, we have a public agreement right now on Caesar, which is a sort of high, fast speed rail project from Washington, D.C. through Virginia into Charlotte. It's an agreement with Virginia. We're designing it. We're buying the right-of-way. It can be done. And I think Curtis talked about them owning land in South Carolina. So it can be done.
Really look great on a Tiger grant application. I think there would be reward for that kind of collaboration, so definitely.
Okay, seeing no more hands, we had originally, Bill, we had talked about having an overview of the themes, the major themes that had come out of today. I think we'll do that in the morning in lieu of doing it now. Bill will do that. And I guess with that, Dave, we are ready you can help us from here, I would ask.
Right, so thank you very much. It was a fantastic day. Let's give the hand
Let's take the
all-
panel. Thank you.